Good morning, my name's James Igoe from Redmayne, Bentley. We are an investment and wealth management firm. For those who aren't familiar with us, we've offices across the UK. We oversee approximately 7 billion in client assets, and next year we'll be turning 150 years old. We're joined today by Lucy Fairey from Private Client Solicitors, or PCS for shorthand. Lucy, thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about the importance of managing generational wealth efficiently. Lucy, could I hand over to start with, and just to talk a little bit about yourself, about Private Client Solicitors and some of the work that you do at the company?
Yes, great. Thank you, James, for that introduction. So I'm a Senior Associate Solicitor at Private Client Solicitors. I am part of the STEP committee, which is the STEP Trust and Estate Practitioners. And PCS is headquartered in Manchester, but we deal with firms, we deal with clients nationally and internationally. And I particularly deal with all types of private client law, from wills, trusts, powers of attorney, estate administration and tax planning, and I also deal with court protection and charity cases.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Lucy, much appreciated. So you did a really good piece of work recently which was focused on the importance of managing generational wealth. One of the areas of that was talking around the level of tax receipts that the Treasury took in just from inheritance tax, which I think was in the region of about £7.5 billion last year. Sizable sum. Can you talk a little bit about that in more general terms, and also why that has been on the rise?
Yeah, so inheritance tax isn't a new concept. It's been around for some time. It's just been known previously as estate duty or capital transfer tax. So in 2009, in April 2009, any estates above the £325,000, which is the nil rate band, is liable to inheritance tax. So inheritance tax is chargeable at 40%. And I think the problem is that property prices have been increasing, whereas the nil rate band has stayed since 2009. So for instance, property prices in the UK are averaging at £305,000, which is nearly 100% greater than when they were in 2009, when the nil rate band was first adjusted. So what's happening is that more estates are actually paying inheritance tax, and that's even greater in London, where the majority of properties in London are above that threshold. And as you said, it's resulted in nearly 7.5 billion being paid inheritance tax in the last 12 months. So you can see why it's seen as the UK's most unpopular tax. People don't want to pay it. So I think it'll be all focus on next month's budget, what will happen. Previously, governments have talked about reforming it, abolishing it. There's now talks about it potentially increasing. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, we watch that space with interest. I guess from our vantage as wealth managers, what we try and think about is, how and when to connect clients with the right type of advice at the right time. From your vantage, when's a good time to start thinking about inheritance tax, and how do you typically form those conversations in the early days?
Yeah, so we would say start to focus on inheritance tax planning sooner rather than later. So there's no quick fix with inheritance tax planning. And what some people think is it's something they do later on in life, in retirement. But actually, to get that 7-year clock ticking, so in order for you to gift away and survive 7 years for that asset to fall out of your estate, it's really important you start that sooner rather than later. And especially in relation to life insurance policies and pensions, it should be something you're starting when you're young. And it also gives a bit of determination to your assets. So we have a lot of clients who think that if they're married without a will, it would automatically pass to the spouse, but that's not actually the case. So if you pass away without a will, under the intestacy rules, if you were married with children, a percentage does go to the children, and that can sometimes result in quite a high inheritance tax liability being paid. So I would say you should be thinking about what ways to reduce your liability, but also it doesn't need to be massive gifts. So you could give away £3,000 a year. That doesn't fall within the 7-year tax rule. You can gift from surplus income. You can invest on the AIM market. So there's many options. We would advise clients to consider what they can afford, so not giving away too much, and what they feel comfortable with giving away. So from your perspective, James, how do you start that conversation with clients, and what do you feel matters to them?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we want to start that conversation as early as possible, just to establish what inheritance tax planning is in place, if any at all. We try and position ourselves like a family office in that we want to connect clients into the right advisor at the right time, and we want to coordinate that well through the lifetime of the relationship. Some of what we hear from clients when we begin those conversations is control, particularly from parents. And when does control begin and end in an inheritance tax planning process? Could you talk a little bit about that, Lucy, in terms of your own experience and kind of how you think about that particular element when you have conversations with clients?
Yes, of course. So we often talk about control when we talk to clients, particularly in relation to inheritance tax planning. Who are going to be the beneficiaries, and what are the circumstances of that beneficiary? So what is their tax, matrimonial, financial, personal circumstances? And does the client feel happy gifting outright or gifting via a trust? So we would often recommend that gifting via a trust is the preferred option. They're flexible instruments, but they also allow protection. So if, for instance, a beneficiary is going through a divorce or a bankruptcy, gifting via a trust is one level removed from personal ownership, which means that that asset is then protected as opposed to being taken in a divorce, for instance. So we would say to clients, we would normally recommend that they are the trustees, so they can get involved in the decision making, even though they can no longer benefit from that asset once they've given it away. As a trustee, they can make sure that they dictate how they want that asset to be for the benefit of their beneficiaries. So having trust in lifetime give them some kind of control, and even after death, having a trust in wills allows them to have control beyond the grave. So what normally happens with the will trust is that you have a letter of wishes that dictates to the trustees what you want to happen when you're no longer here, and that's a way a client can ensure that what they want to happen is dictated for when they pass away.
Yeah, that's great, Lucy. Thanks so much for that. I guess the last one to finish on is it's very much of the moment, but we're approaching an October budget. What changes do you envisage, in particular with relation to inheritance tax, if at all, in the near future?
Yeah, so it's really hard to state what's going to happen. I think nobody knows. It will be all eyes on the budget and what Labour government policies are. However, we would always say to clients, the focus is on planning and not politics. So nobody knows when they're going to pass away and what laws will be in place at that point. And what we would normally recommend a client is they would create a will in relation to the law as it stands. And at least then something is in place. So if things do change, most of the hard work has already been done, and we can easily go back and we can, as policies change and circumstances change, we can update that letter of wishes and that will quite easily. We would say it's better than doing nothing at all. So we have had clients previously before the general election who thought inheritance tax would be scrapped, so they decided not to do anything, and we are now a few months later and nothing's happened, which has then delayed that process. So I would say let's get something in place now and do something now. And I think it's important to know that IHT is avoidable by following the reliefs available and getting correct advice. So even HMRC themselves say that only 4% of states actually pay inheritance tax. It's just getting the correct advice. It can be an avoidable tax. And I think we would probably all agree that we pay tax all our life, and then the last thing we want to do is then pay a big chunk when we pass away.
Lucy, that's fantastic. Thanks so much for your time today. I know how busy you are. It's been a really enlightening conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.